Welcome back to the Good Eye Podcast. I'm Jay Smack, and today my guest is Sara Daves. Sara is an intuitive purpose coach, but she is many other things as well. She's a crisis interventionist, I guess you could say. I'm not exactly sure how she would describe that, but she's excellent at breaking down differences between two different parties and finding common ground. I know that restorative justice and unitive justice is very big with her. She's very active in that space, and she's also a mentor who helps people, primarily women, manifest their destiny, for lack of a better description. She helps people take an active role in designing the life they want by taking action and recognizing who it is they are at their core and laying that out and letting them achieve exactly what their true purpose is. I'll let her talk about it a little bit more rather than me describe it. She runs the Manifest Like a Goddess program, and that's where the manifesting comes in. And she's a fascinating person. Intuitive purpose coach is absolutely accurate. She's very intuitive. And she's an empath in practice and a fascinating person. So let's get right to it. Here is my conversation with Sara Daves on today's Good Eye Podcast. And here we are back on the Good Eye Podcast. And my guest today is an old friend, well, old figuratively speaking. I'm the old in this equation. Sara Daves, intuitive purpose coach, and many, many other things. Let's just get right into it. How are you, Sara?
I'm great, Jay. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. This is too long coming. I know you came in with Albert Moore probably a year or more ago because you guys are close and he's a bit of a mentor of yours. And we had been trying to hook up and do your own episode. And so I'm glad that finally happened.
Yeah, same here. Yeah, Albert, I love him. He's so wonderful. We have amazing conversations about the masculine feminine dynamic. And sometimes we get tripped up with each other. And then, we've always been talking about how to have that conversation for other people. And it's challenging. We're still getting there. So,
well, that was actually an episode that I had done before relaunching this podcast under another name. So I haven't gone back to edit it. All the same content's there, but I'm just going to take out the old mentions. But I need to do that because the dynamic between you guys is really cool, and you're so yin and yang together.
Yeah, he's a lot of fun.
Well, cool. Why don't we start off by explaining exactly what an intuitive purpose coach is in your eyes? You do so many things with your, meditation and helping primarily women, females, manifest the life they want, not exclusively women, but you specialize in helping women. So what, in your eyes, is an intuitive purpose coach?
Yes. Okay. So I'll take it back to the conversations that Albert and I have about the masculine feminine dynamic. So a purpose is essentially associated with masculine energy. And so we all have purpose. We all have masculine energy. We all have feminine energy. The purpose is solely masculine energy. When we step into our purpose, we're stepping into that energy. And so the intuitive piece is the feminine part. And that is the opening for flow and allowing and receiving, and just really being in that feminine space. And so when the two come together, something beautiful happens. It's trusting the universe to open up for you so you can step into your purpose. And so I help my clients first by moving through this logic-based testing for the first month, and we learn everything there is to know about them. And so it's very validating and sometimes like eye-opening. Most of the time people have this knowledge. It might be buried, but most people have the knowledge of what they are good at. Maybe they were told when they were growing up that it wasn't valuable. So we uncover all kinds of things, including personality profiles and innate ways of being, and then also defense mechanisms. So the things that block them essentially from purpose. So I use those two pieces. I am an intuitive and empathic. I would call myself an empath since I can feel everybody's emotions most of the time, and I use that tool of mine, or that gift ability of mine, along with everything that I've learned about them, and then we move through 12 weeks of uncovering and just unpacking all of these blocks and all of these beliefs that have been keeping them from their purpose.
That's really interesting because I've known you for quite a while, and I'm really kind of just now putting together that the phrase or the title, if you will, is intuitive purpose coach. It's not intuitive purpose coach, which is kind of the same thing, but definitely not. So along those lines, it's like you said, the male energy is more of the purpose. Is that at the heart of why so many men, and I don't want to get a bunch of guff from people about generalizing, we're just speaking to existing archetypes, as it were, well-known archetypes. Is that why men are often not as good at listening, and trying to fix everything, action before listening? Does that have
Yeah.
validity? Yeah.
Yeah, it really is. And like you said, this is not about sexual orientation. And even if you're a heterosexual male, you don't have to be leading, you don't have to prefer to lead with your masculine energy. You can lead with the feminine. It's just, in talking about this in general terms, typically a heterosexual male will lead with their masculine energy, and a heterosexual female will lead with her feminine energy. And so this creates polarity. So there's a butting of heads that goes on, because yes, the masculine wants to take action, and there's a competitive spirit, and there is a desire to fix problems. And then the feminine is very different. So the feminine, the desire is to connect, create connection. And the primary focus is love, right? And so it's more about, so that conversation, right? When a woman starts to talk about her problems and a man wants to fix it, she's trying to create connection. She's not trying to solve a problem.
Yeah, that's interesting as well, because often, say, a woman traditionally will be talking about what's bugging her that day or what's on her mind, and the guy often feels like that somehow he's to blame. I think that's where the fixing comes in. It's like, well, that's something about me. Let me fix it. Let me take care of it right now, as opposed to just hearing it, which is often enough, often enough for the equation to say, okay, now I've been heard. But guys often don't even get that far.
No, you're absolutely right. I deal with this all the time, and talking with my female clients, and just really having that desire to be seen, heard, and understood. Because, like I said, they're looking for the connection. And so, a lot of times when we're talking about purpose, we're talking about these relationships that they're in. Because if they don't know how to do relationships, then it's going to inevitably block them from their purpose. Because the way I look at it is that we have our own problem to solve, right? Say my problem is 2 plus 2 and yours is 4 plus 5. And so and then we can do this back and forth too. So if I'm trying to figure out how to fix you, I've just taken on 4 plus 5, and I can't even solve my 2 plus 2. So it's the same for the masculine energy as well. It's like you're only responsible for solving your own stuff. And so a lot comes into play with that. Like, expectations are very dangerous. So I teach women how to set boundaries. Conflict resolution, that's a huge part of what I do. It's woven in the fabric of everything that I do. And people just don't have the tools. We're used to moving through the world in a very different way than the way that I teach. And I'm teaching essentially unity,
I'm glad you brought that up, because often when you hear the term purpose coach, or some of the, I don't know, and people can make their own judgment, but some of the charlatans, when it comes to, be who you are, take charge of the day, whatever it is, there's authentic ones and non-authentic ones out there, but you hear that and people go, well, easy for you to say, take charge and be who you are. I got to pay my bills. But what you're doing is more helping people understand who they are and not fitting themselves into some narrative that has been placed upon them. So it's
Right.
not necessarily, I was born to be an artist, not an accountant. It's more of figuring out who you are and then living that, and the rest almost takes care of itself.
Yes, because purpose really isn't about what you do, it's who you are. And so, I look at it like this. I look at purpose as this large umbrella. Okay. So there are so many unique aspects of a person. Under that, there are things that we like to do, things that we're good at. We have natural talents, gifts, and abilities. We have a particular way we like to move through the world. We even have our own set of defense mechanisms that we picked up throughout childhood that have actually served us in some way. But we have all these things, and then we figure out what we're good at. We put all these pieces together, and then we create something to do. Okay, so I call that the mission. So we have all these different missions under our purpose. The problem is most of the time people are not sure what they're good at. Like, I don't know what I want to be when I grow up, or I really wanted to do this thing growing up, but I was told that get a real job or go to college and study something just as a backup plan, and that ends up being your you know forefront plan. So that's really the major issue that I'm noticing with my clients, is that you know they're not really paying attention to what they want. They're paying attention to the set of expectations that have been placed upon them through our social systems. And it's not just family. It's not just because mom and dad said you have to be a doctor. In my case, my father was an artist. He was like, you have to be a writer, So, I mean, I got it too. But it's also the school system. It's also our social system. It's also our peers, and maybe the neighborhood or city we grew up in. So there's a lot of factors that come into play when it has to do with like how we're groomed to move through the world.
So let's say you're working with a client, um, and you start really getting into the process of allowing them to understand who they are, what their purpose is, what their true identity is, and you get really into the weeds into something, say, uh, I don't want to bring up Freud because he's a whole other issue, but something in the subconscious that has been put there because of, say, an experience or an insecurity from early in childhood or something. Is that something you can work through, or do you encounter times when you find it, you go through those doors, those deep dark doors, do you have to hand off to someone else, say a psychologist or a psychiatrist? And I mean, how do you deal with that because I'm sure you find some stuff that's been there for a long time, and I've seen the results of some of your work. So I'm asking from that point of view where, wow, you really found something here and it was super helpful.
Yeah, totally. So the way I talk about the way I like to talk about coaching is and how it's different than like talk therapy and things like that. And now I've received coaching from other coaches, and I've received talk therapy for a long time, and so there's both equally helpful, but in very different ways. So the talk therapy, helps you get in touch with your feelings over a long period of time. It doesn't really um, okay, so I'll just give you my experience. So my experience was that I kind of got stuck in the same place talking about the past over and over and over again. And with coaching, typically, you will figure out what the issue is and then start to move through it. So with coaching, the way I perceive it is the only way out is through. So there has to be some level of courageousness and being ready, to do this work. Now, I've never signed on anyone who wasn't willing to do it, and we've done it. And another thing too is what's interesting about the conflict resolution work that I do and bringing that into the coaching is that inevitably when we look at a conflict, what's happening is that there is a wound that is buried, and that wound is trying to come up to be healed. And we know that when conflict arises. So conflict is actually a gift between, or a gift and a bridge between separation and connection. So there are certain tools that I use to help people deal with inner conflict, because an inner conflict occurs, usually, if it's a long-term inner conflict, usually from childhood, that has resulted from an outer conflict. Okay. And when you're a kid, you're just taking in information, you're not analyzing it, you're just taking it at face value. And then it becomes this, it lives inside of you. And as you move through life, it can trip you up or block you or put up walls where you don't want to have them. So it's important to move through that. And so you can move through that once you take the conflict and you kind of just, you honor it and then move it over and then go deeper and figure out, okay, so how do I feel about this situation right now? What do I need to know about it? And we just start to dig down into that. And then the wound comes up and we can take responsibility for that, because I don't care what conflict you're in. And I know this sounds kind of crazy if you look out into the world and you see lots of horrible things going on. And I'm not talking about anything in particular today. I'm talking about just conflict in general. If you are in a conflict, then you have to know that you are in some way partly responsible for that. But there's no blame here, because there's no fault or blame without prior agreement. So we're not talking about blame. We're not talking about being in the punitive system where we're looking for somebody to blame. We're looking at it for what it is. And just to give you um, some more information on this, and what I'm talking about is that, um, so there was a mother who lost her child, um, who, and I care about this because I lost my child. Her child was murdered. Okay. And he was a young kid. He was a teenager, and he was murdered by a 16-year-old. And she, of course, she hated this kid. She's like, he's a monster. He needs to be put behind bars. He is a menace to society, and my life is ruined, and my son's life is over. And years went by, and finally they connected on because of someone who wanted to bring them together to foster some forgiveness and healing. And when they went through the conflict resolution process, what happened is they loved each other, and she adopted him. Now, that sounds insane,
She
right?
adopted her
Son's
deceased
killer.
son's killer.
Yep.
Wow.
Yeah. And so this is the kind of magic that occurs in this conflict resolution work. And so I just wanted to give you that example. And that's an outer conflict between two people that's pretty heavy. But we also have that level of inner conflict that's equally as heavy, that we can work through on our own. It's the
Yeah.
same.
And you mentioned two different conflict scenarios, which is what I was going to ask. You hear the term conflict resolution, and you sort of assume that it's between two people. That two people have a beef, whether it's a married couple or partners or whatever, or even something as drastic as what you said. Someone a killer and the killer's family member. But really, conflict resolution can be just us, and there's a conflict that we can't even identify that's preventing us from living our true purpose. I guess once you hit that, you got to spend quite a bit of time peeling back the layers of that onion.
Yeah, I mean, it does take some time, but typically we can get through. We can get through it. It's been my experience that those who really want to get through it will. And so we're talking about this inner conflict, and what happens is sometimes we buy in to the story that we were told. And the belief system that we want certain things in life because it's socially acceptable. It will, finally make us happy, and we buy into this, and then we do the things that we're told, and we walk through life, and then at some point we stop and say, wait, actually, I'm not happy. I'm not happy. So what's going on? So that's like that midlife crisis situation, or typically what happens is that person will look around in their external reality and say, it's everybody else's fault. It's my spouse or it's my boss or my children or my friends or, I need a brand new car or something, and it's just the focus is on the external rather than going within and focusing on what's going on inside. Because we don't want to sometimes admit that the path that we took might not be the best path for us, but we can't get it wrong. So it's like no judgment, right? I mean, we're learning. This is a journey. But at some point when you're feeling that unfulfillment, it is important to go within and say, wait, maybe I can do something different. Maybe it's time for me to do something different. And that's when people like the slam on the brakes. They're like, wait a minute, like, have I wasted all my time? And what do I want to do? I have no idea. So that's where I usually get people.
To that point, what part does meditation play in, not necessarily in what you offer people, but in self-understanding, self-awareness, in your eyes?
The meditation is a huge piece. I mean, it's required in order to go within because, I mean, that's your, I mean, think about it. So when you look with your eyes outside in your external reality, you see things and you can, depending on where you are, like I'm in this office, I can see the four walls. I can't see beyond that. Even when I go outside, I can see down the street, but I can't see beyond that. When you close your eyes and you go within, it's expansive. Like there are no edges. So you can go as far as you want, and yes, it takes practice. Some people say, well, I'm not very good at meditation. Well, that's because it takes practice. And there are some very good reasons that, I mean, it is true. Like someone, for instance, with a high rhythm memory, they do their best thinking when they're moving. So they can sit still and their mind turns off, but they can't sit still for very long without, feeling antsy. They want to get up, and that's hard. And then if someone with low rhythm memory, for instance, this is one of the learning channels that I test for. So the low rhythm memory, when the person sits down, they can sit still for a long period of time, but their mind will not stop, And so both instances, there's tools around that, like when your mind doesn't stop, it doesn't mean that you're not good at it. It means that you're attached to your thoughts and maybe judging yourself because you can't turn your mind off. And it's okay. Like our brain thinks how many thoughts a day? I don't even know the answer to that question. Thousands and thousands, maybe 100,000. And if we think we're going to turn our brain off totally during meditation, we're fooling ourselves. We can just let it go by, and eventually you'll get there. It just takes practice.
I like that you bring that up because people who may not have a meditation practice and are trying to get into it think that they're failing if they have all these thoughts or if they don't somehow have a psychedelic experience or something. Whereas it's sort of like when people don't want to go to the gym because they think they're going to be the only person there not in shape. It's absolutely the opposite. 80, 90% of the people at the gym are not in shape, all working towards a goal. We're all in the same boat. And it's meditation. The thoughts you talked about are part of the they're vital to the meditation itself. Whether it's experiencing, everything's an experience to your point, everything's a practice. And if people would look at the thoughts and see the thoughts as thoughts and not just think them, they can actually integrate them into their practice and help be beneficial. I've heard your meditation series, which is available on your website, saradaves.com. And you take the approach where you actually give cues, if you will. You talk about the chakra and balls of light and things like that, whereas other meditative teachers, and it's all, 6 of one, half a dozen of the other, it's whatever works for you, talk about just following the breath, which you do too. do you think one? This is a stupid question, especially given the subject. But I don't want to say is one better than the other. But have you found a type of meditation that works for you? And do you find other types of meditation, for example, focusing purely on experience and consciousness, that works better for other people? And do you try to find what works better for each individual? Do you follow me?
Yes, yeah. So I'll tell you, it's interesting to listen to your own voice and guided meditation. That's not something I even considered and you produce those meditations, and they're amazing. So thank you. Everybody loves them, and so I think like when you first are getting started, or if you have a purpose behind the meditation, then guided meditations are great. And then I mean, these are binaural beats and theta waves. So this is essentially reprogramming the subconscious to do something different. So, like you said, the chakra, there's 7 chakra meditations in the key of each chakra. And then, there's one on authenticity. If you want to step into your authenticity or become or live each day feeling more authentic, there's a soul guidance meditation. So I will um, prescribes the wrong word. I will offer these meditations to my clients as I feel they need them. So if I feel like they have a block in the heart chakra, they get the heart chakra meditation. If I feel like they're having trouble showing up authentically in the work environment or at home, then I give them the authenticity meditation. If they're open to the spiritual guidance and really, I can tell that they have practiced their intuition, and using it, then I'll give that to them. So, but guided meditations aren't everything. I mean, silent meditation, that's what I do. I also do Kriya yoga, and that meditation requires, chanting and things like that, and having mantra. And and then I've worked with some meditation masters who have taught me other things. So I try all kinds of stuff, and then there's even walking meditation. So and with your eyes open, Shambhala. So there's all kinds of stuff that you can do, and it just depends on what feels right. And I don't know if you will know until you try it.
I really enjoy meditating with my eyes open. You give it a few minutes. It seems a little weird when you're settling in, but when you do and you're kind of focusing on experience, not just the experience of vision, but all experience, tactile, feeling, hearing, thoughts, all that, the field of vision sort of starts to fall away, and your gaze gets very wide, and then you almost, I guess like I say, everything's a practice. You almost have to restart because then you remember to see, and when you remember to see, you're like, oh, that was fun for a while, and then it starts to fall away again. But I find it not more fulfilling, just different, because you wouldn't expect it. Most people think you sit there with your eyes closed and you think deep thoughts, but when you meditate with your eyes open, it's like a waking dream state.
Yes, it really is. It's a very interesting way to do it. At first it's like, oh gosh, this is not going to work because I'm going to be looking at everything. But yes, you're right. The field of vision closes, and then colors come, and then, well, it narrows, but then you're open. And as a kid, I didn't know I was doing this. But I was meditating with my eyes open. I would go out to the school field because I lived by my school, and I would lie in the grass when there were no clouds in the sky and the sky was just indigo, and I would lay there and I would just get lost in the color. And sometimes I was there for hours and I didn't realize it. Uh, well, that was bizarre in its own way. But, but like, but yes, I mean, it's like being in the world. It's like not having to check out, right? Yes, it's expansive when you close your eyes. I mean, you're in the darkness where nothing exists, but where everything came from, right? And you're part of that. So that's an important thing. But then being in the world, like getting grounded in the body and being part of this world, and then seeing beyond it. That's what I my experience with meditating with my eyes open.
One of the things in the physical world I think you could point to is, when sometimes you see those floaters in your vision that's actually tiny little particles in the moisture in your eye. It's kind of like that. Like you see them, but reality is still going on in the same place, but you're one step before consciousness. Consciousness is happening to you, not in front of you, I guess. I don't know.
Yeah, or you're participating in it,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
I mean, so my dad used to say, I am in this world, but I am not of it. And then me and my brother would make jokes about it, because like I try to start my lawnmower and the water hose gets caught up in there, and I'm like, I am in this world, but I am not of it. But really, I mean, but we are in this world and we are of it. We are. It's important to be grounded in the body, and not just check out into spiritual la la land. Um, you know, the us spiritual teachers sometimes can get tripped up in that way, and you know, kind of exist outside of the body more than we are grounded. So, like, I would recommend yoga to get back grounded in the body.
Speaking of spiritual teacher, I would imagine that sometimes your students/clients get pretty attached to you.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's like every new client. I mean, I get to know them to the core. We become friends. So it's like I'm making friends with every client, and when you truly know someone, um, and and I'm offering my experiences, to serve as an example for them. They truly get to know me. We're all connected. And so when we have that understanding, we naturally love one another. And that's just the way it is.
You mentioned being an empath earlier. Two scenarios here. One is it difficult for you when you work through some of these issues, especially being intuitive the way you are, with your clients on their way to self-discovery? And two, what's it like, say, in a room when everybody's really happy or if everybody's really sad? Does that take a toll on you?
Yes, it does. Now, when I'm working with clients, I am focused on them. So I know where the energy is coming from. So that's a lot easier to deal with and to work with than if I'm walking into a room blindly and I don't know who's feeling bad. Because it can just be one person, and all of a sudden I feel it. And I don't know where it's coming from. I can't just pinpoint the person, but I'm feeling the energy. If it's strong enough, and I'm not saying that it happens every time. When there's someone in the room who's doing great, who's feeling really good, and their energy's filling up the room, I'll feel that too. And it's really interesting because uh, the innate preference that I test for is through the Myers Briggs type indicator, and that that is a wonderful tool. Now, and I don't mean anything against Myers-Briggs or Enneagram or Highland's ability, but those are the tests that I use. I love them. I bring them together and use them in a very different way. I don't flip the Myers-Briggs upside down to say, oh, when you're in stress, this is what happens to you. And then the Enneagram, it tests your, like, oh, well, you're always going to be flawed. But if you move to a healthy state, this is what it looks like. I don't do that because you make them do too many things and then it means nothing. So I bring them together. So, and I'm not talking about the Enneagram right now, but the Myers Briggs. So I'm an INFJ. And if anybody who's interested in the Myers Briggs or knows anything about INFJ, you can even like look this up on YouTube. There are many channels. INFJs pick up the energy no matter where they are. And there's this one story of this person who would come home. No, I'm sorry, they worked from home, and then at 5 o'clock every day they would get really sad, and they couldn't figure out why. And then they discovered that their neighbor who lived upstairs um, was coming home from work every day really depressed, feeling very depressed, and they're picking that energy up. So an INFJ can go into a restaurant and feel like someone's agitation before anything happens. And like typically what would happen is you feel the agitation and then you might hear an argument or something like that. So it's it's so interesting because, and I've worked with all Myers-Briggs types. I mean, all 16, and they're all very different and all very beautiful and in their own special way. But just from my experience as an INFJ, I'll talk about like the defense mechanism that I picked up, as a result of being an INFJ and being highly sensitive and picking up on everybody's emotions. What happens is, like I just know things, right? I'll just say something like that person, um, you know, just lost their job, or that person just broke up with their significant other, and or something random like that. But seeming like, how in the world did you know that? So naturally, people say, "You don't know that," you know. So as a kid, you don't analyze what the stuff you're taking in. You doubt, instead it's like, oh, I don't know that. So I'm doubting my natural gifts. And so everybody's got these natural gifts. And if they're not honored, right? And I mean, how do we do that as human beings? It's part of the process. We can't blame our parents because they didn't know or see our natural abilities. It's just a process that we have to move through. And so this is how we get the defense mechanism is by taking in false information about yourself and as a kid, and not being able to analyze it and choose whether to accept it or reject it.
That's interesting. I'm also an INFJ.
Are you?
Yes,
You know what I'm talking
so
about.
so a lot of what you say makes sense. And people don't necessarily have to buy in 100% to Myers-Briggs or any of the others, but it's along the lines of karma. If the people say, I don't believe in karma. Well, if you act like a jerk, people are going to treat you like a jerk. If you treat people with respect, you'll be treated with respect. Karma cannot be any simpler. Even if you don't believe in it, you get back what you give, and to your point, when you're a little kid, maybe you're an introvert and you're in a class and people give you a hard time for not speaking up and not being more engaged. But the energy, this is just me spouting off here, but the energy has to go somewhere. It's not created or destroyed. It just changes places and forms. So you're taking in so much more of what's going on as opposed to being out in front and creating it. But it's all the same, it's like just putting a glass of water from one glass to the other, but you still get the same amount of water. So for you to be processing all of that in a room, can you? And this sort of goes back to my previous question. Say everybody's in a good mood and they're all feeling it, but there's that one person that sticks out to you, or you know what I mean? And I know it's not that black and white. You're like, oh, someone's sad. Your spidey sense goes off. But I'm just curious as to what degree your empathetic nature manifests itself.
Okay. All right. So I'll give you an example.
Okay.
Okay. So I lived in DC. I worked for a nonprofit that was run by the FCC. And it was my first corporate job. And I was a journalist before that. I'd never been in the corporate world. And I was in my 30s. And so I hadn't drank the Kool-Aid, like I wasn't like, my career wasn't born in the corporate world. So it's not like I just, oh, this is the way it is. I'm like, wow, this is really bizarre, in a lot of different ways. So I'm just, I'm learning, like the corporate speak and how people move and do the things. And so I'm in the boardroom and I'm trying to show up in my specialty, which was communications and what I do. I was an editor, and I couldn't focus. I couldn't focus. And I'm just like, well, I don't really understand why. And then I started to develop a stuttering problem. And I'm like, okay, so clearly this is a problem. I'm going to get some coaching. And I went to a workshop that, I asked my boss if I could go do this leadership workshop. And this woman, when I got there, I realized that she was more than what met the eye. Like she was an intuitive. I recognized it. And I went up to her and I said two things. And I think I mentioned Reiki, and she says, let's sneak out for lunch, you know. So she became my coach, my first coach that I ever had. And she said, you know, you're clairsentient. That's what's going on with you. And she's like, you know, I was telling her about, you know, my heart palpitations like in the boardroom. And I felt like I couldn't feel my feet and I was stuttering. I couldn't get out what I wanted to say. And she said, has this ever been a problem for you before? And I said, no. She said, okay, you're picking up somebody's energy in the room. You need to figure out whose it is. And here is how you can ground yourself. And we did a few exercises where I could practice in the boardroom. And when I did that, I could learn to let go of the other person's stuff. And what I found is that I stopped stuttering and my boss started stuttering. And later,
Jedi.
yeah.
Wow.
So later on, another person who was present said, that was really weird. Like I noticed that you started stuttering, you know, and now you're not. And now he's stuttering again. And I was like, okay, so this was an issue with him before. Yeah, it was. But he stopped when you started doing it. I was like, okay, got it. Wow. So that was the first time that, that I recognized what was going on. It was weird.
Oh my God. Have you ever seen the movie Scanners?
No.
Some people will get that reference. Anyway, it's this telepathic power, and this guy blows up another guy's head just with his mind. So anyway, the guy in the boardroom should consider himself lucky that you didn't pull that trick.
Yeah, how dare you make me stutter?
All right. Well, we'll start to draw it down, but I'm curious. You may not quantify it this way, but by the way, I have to mention how ironic and meta it is that your true purpose is helping people find their true purpose, and at some point you realize that it's very meta.
Right.
But is there a common thing that you find? Again, I'm not trying to quantify, I'm just curious, that people don't realize about themselves, or a common thing that holds people back. And maybe it's just as simple as something that, maybe it's as simple as not walking their true path. Maybe it's something as simple as that. Or is there a more granular notion of something that holds people back?
Well, I mean, so I think that ultimately your purpose finds you, but it can't find you if you're buried under all this stuff. And so the biggest thing that I've seen over and over again is people tend to take things really personally, like their interactions with others, and then make it mean something about themselves. And so that's what holds them back. It's like, they walk into an environment, and they're being impacted, and they say, well, this person just, is all these bad things, and this is why I'm not happy. But really, like I said before, and like you said, I'm karma, right? And I'm not talking about this in punitive measures like revenge. I mean, karma means learning. But really, the external world is our mirror. And that's true for everybody. So whenever you're looking out and you're seeing something that you don't like and you're judging it, then that means it's time to look inside and see why you're judging yourself. Because if you don't judge yourself, then you don't judge anyone else either.
I'm glad you brought that up, and like I said, we'll close it up now. But we have a mutual friend, and I won't say who it is here, but this person is so sweet and is always thinking of other people. And I know that he is in a leadership role in a certain capacity. And recently he said about his organization, he's like, I don't know if it's the same as it used to be for me. He said, but I'm going to give it just a little bit more time to make sure there's not something more I can do, because he's very giving and very empathetic. So at any rate, your point is well taken. But I would encourage people to check you out at Sara without an H, Daves.com. I know you're running some specials or some special programs for a while, not to put you on the spot. Is there anything like that going on you want to mention?
Yeah, so I have an online coaching program. It's not just for women, but it's for those who want to or who naturally lead with their feminine energy. So it's called Manifest Like a Goddess, and there are 4 different courses in that program, and it it has all of my meditations, all 12 that we did together, which is so awesome. And I'm available like on Facebook. There's a private Facebook group. So I'm available once every other week to answer questions and things like that. And right now, if you on my website, if you go to my website, saradaves.com, and click on manifest, then there will be a coupon code right there on the page that you can use to sign up for the program. And so far it's been wonderful. And let's see. So I think probably what's going to happen is like I'm going to start making these courses available if people want to take them along with a group of people. So right now it's evergreen. You can start anytime you want. But if anyone's interested in doing like a course, like, it's only like 14 weeks. It's 14 weeks. So it's 7 different modules every other week, and going through that together is sometimes more helpful for people than just like, picking up some online coaching. But yeah, it's there. And so if anybody has any questions, please feel free to reach out and ask.
Cool. Sara Daves, Intuitive Purpose Coach, thank you so much. I hope you'll come back and be a friend of the podcast.
Yes, I would love to.
All right, cool. Thanks for being here. And saradaves.com online is where you can be found. And thanks for your time here today on the Good Eye Podcast.
Yes, thank you, Jay.
Thanks again to Sara for stopping by and making some time. I would encourage you to reach out to her if you have any thoughts about figuring out your true purpose, walking your true path, or if you just want to check out her meditations. She is really good at what she does. I'd encourage you to check her out at saradaves.com. As I mentioned, SARA, there's no H, saradaves.com. Thanks to her for being here. Thanks to you for listening. If you have any feedback or questions, you can hit me up directly at j@jsmack.com or at goodeyepodcast@gmail.com for the show address. Either one's fine. And find all the episodes on Apple Podcasts, Google. Once Google gets it all worked out, they're working on a new platform again. Google Podcast Manager, I think they're calling it. You can also find it on Spotify or go directly to goodeyepodcast.com. Either way, I do appreciate your time and attention and encourage you to look at life with your good eye.